Research Center here at Murray State University, and welcome back to 10 at 10, episode 113. 10 at 10 is brought to you through a partnership between Murray State University, Grow West, the Technology Council of West Kentucky, KY Innovation, and our local partner, Sprocket Innovation in Paducah, and the Kentucky Innovation Station in Madisonville. This week, we're going to start talking about ransomware. Ransomware is a topic we've talked about a lot. It's a topic that continues to be an issue. It's a topic that we're going to continue to talk about, and unfortunately, it is may not be slowing down any. It's more directed. It's just a nuisance that we are going to have around in the cybersecurity world for a long time. And the reason I bring it up this week is that last week, CISA, who is the federal agency that is responsible for cybersecurity, CISA issued an advisory, as they do often on different issues. And this advisory was stop ransomware. In particular, it was the Royal ransomware variant and family, I guess, of ransomware. And they wanted to talk about it. What do we need to do to stop it? What's it looking like? It's becoming a nuisance. And they have a 10-page document that's got a lot of information in it that they issued that. And I thought that this is a good excuse to talk about ransomware and what we need to be doing to stop it. In the actual advisory, there are technical details. There is how it maps up to the MITRE attack framework that we talked about before. It's got malicious IPs that are connected to it. It's got tools that are talked about. And, if you are so inclined, it's actually really interesting how all of it lines up and how they make those connections back to the framework and to the different pieces. However, for most people that are watching this that aren't highly technical, that information doesn't mean a whole lot to you. So I want to skip that part. But what I do want to talk about is the last thing that it does also include, and it has 15 mitigations to stop or minimize the impact of that ransomware attack. So it has, at the end of this document, it has 15 things, and some of them are complicated. It's not just a quick checklist you get through in a morning, but it's 15 mitigations that your organization can do to minimize the impact of ransomware, in particular of this Royal ransomware variant that they're talking about. But it is generally speaking, really ransomware things that you can do to stop or reduce the impact of ransomware. There's a lot that we do. So I wanted to just walk through some of these things because I think it's really important for you to know that. We're not going to get through them all today, so we'll come back next week and pick up where we stop. Protect yourself from ransomware. Step number 1 is to actually implement a recovery plan. Have a recovery plan. You need to maintain maintain and retain multiple copies of your data, of the sensitive data that's on your hard drives, the things that you can't live without if your system goes down. They need to be physically disconnected, separated, segmented, in a secure location, separate from your current network. If you have backups that you're doing already and they're connected to your hard drive or connected to your network on a hard drive or in whatever system, that is not disconnected. That is not separate. That is not segmented. That is not what we're talking about here. You want to have, and we've talked about backups in the past, want to have multiple copies of your backups and do that in multiple formats with one of those at least offsite. All right. Second thing, this is going to be a complicated one, and I want to make sure that I spend a little bit of time on this item. Require all accounts to follow the NIST password standards. So the NIST is the National Institute for Standards and Technology. They have standards. They have recovery planning standards. They have password standards. They have security framework that we've talked about. They have standards for most technology protocols or processes. They have a special publication 800 series, and there's hundreds of documents there that if you want to follow a standard for doing tabletop exercises, there's a standard there. There's best practices there. And I recommend that you do that. In particular, it has standards for passwords. And what it says is that passwords need to be at least 8 characters and no more than 64 characters in length. And there's a reason for the length, the cap as well. But it also says that if you use longer passwords, so let's say you use a 12, 14, 16 character password, then their standard also says don't require users to change it no more than once a year. And what that means is that, and we've talked about this before, if you have a really strong password and it is not being reused, it's being stored correctly, and I'll get to that in just a second, then a strong password, a strong, unique password is going to be pretty good, pretty safe for a while. And I would rather you, and the NIST standard backs this up, I would rather you pick a strong password that is long and you not change that password unless it's compromised than I would you having a password that changes every 3 months. And the reason is that you're going to have to remember a new password every 3 months. It's hard for people to remember passwords. So let's create a stronger password and ask you to remember that password a little bit longer. That's the way that I'll look at that. And that's what the NIST standard says as well. It also says to store those passwords only in a hashed format, using an industry standard password manager. It recommends that you add salts to shared login credentials. And that's something that's a little bit technical, but it's a random character that would go along with your password so that it would make it harder for a hacker to find your password if they stole a password database, for example. Don't reuse passwords. You've heard me say that time and time again, because if one password gets stolen, then all of your passwords are stolen if they're the same one. So if my username, which is not necessarily a private thing, if my username and password get stolen at website A, and I use the same password and the same username on websites B, C, and D, then all of them are assumed to be compromised as well. That's why we need unique passwords. It also implement multiple failed login attempt account lockouts. So after a certain number of attempts, some people use 3, some people use 10. But after so many tries, that automatically gets you automatically get locked out. And what that means is that if somebody's trying to brute force your password onto a system, then they may try thousands of passwords before they guess your password. So if we have that set up to where it automatically locks you out after so many failed logins, then we're going to protect ourselves from that issue. Disable password hints. If I know that your password's one of 5 things and I ask for a hint and it gives me the first letter of one of those 5, then it's going to help me to be able to guess your password. And then the last thing that I mentioned was to stop requiring so many passwords on your system. Stop requiring passwords to change often on your system. That will certainly help. And actually, let me add one other piece of that is it's also important that your username and password that you use on a daily basis is also not the administrator for your network. Because if somebody compromises your account, then they have also compromised the password for everybody, or the master key, so to speak, for your network, computer and network as well. So that's never a good idea either. Number 3, and we'll stop with this one, is require multi-factor authentication. I'm not going to go in details on this because we've talked about multi-factor authentication MFA, 2FA, it's called a couple of different things, but using a second method of authenticating your credentials, of your identity, in addition to your password, is an important piece as well. There's a lot more that we're going to get to. Again, I talked about there's 15 things, and we've gotten through 3 today. So we'll come back next week, and we'll continue talking about the things that you can do as an organization to keep yourself, your organization safe from ransomware. That doesn't mean that I promise you won't get it, but if you do catch it, if you do get hit with ransomware, if you are a victim, it will also minimize the impact that that ransomware has on your organization. They're important tips. I hope you listen. I hope you follow along. If you have questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week back here on 10 at 10. Thank you. Bye.